Laura and Leona, we're so happy to have you both here today. This is very exciting.
We're really excited. We're really excited to be here and share our little story.
Well, you honestly have an amazing story. We got your testimonial, which we featured in our June newsletter last month, and that was a cool story. And then you and I were able to connect on the phone for a little while last time. And your story is not only interesting, but I think it's also one that's going to be really empowering to other women that are maybe have similar journeys to you or thinking about diving into motherhood. And I just really think it's something that people are going to really be interested to hear. So anyways, thank you. I know you have a newborn and you're out visiting your sister, and thank you for taking the time, I guess. So Laura, I guess just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you're from, and tell us a little bit about how you got started in life.
Sure. So I'm Laura. I like to tell people that I was born on a mountaintop in Tennessee because it makes me feel a little bit more closely connected to Dolly Parton. I grew up in Mississippi. That's where my family's from. And I am one of 3 sisters, the oldest, which I'm sure will come through in my bossiness. And my parents are both in. Are you gonna chat now?
Yeah, tell us.
My parents are both in giving professions. So my dad's an Episcopal priest and my mom is an occupational therapist. So I kind of grew up in a family where service and community was sort of the norm and expected. There you go, have a little snack. Okay. So I was born in a mountaintop of Tennessee, but raised in Mississippi. And then I decided to get out of my comfort zone, and I got into my dream school for undergraduate and went to Yale for college. That was a huge culture shock.
And then for your career in public health, was that a job that you are doing remotely, or did you have an office there? What does that look like for you?
For most of my career, I had normal jobs, and I was just growing more and more kind of disillusioned with all of that. I tried to find another job that was like a normal 9-to-5, but I couldn't quite find anything that was a good fit, in part because I didn't want to commit to working on any one thing. So It dawned on me at one point that I should just become a consultant. And I work from home. I have a home office. Some of my client work requires me to be in person, so I do take trips occasionally, although I guess not anymore because of COVID. I'm getting really good at virtual meetings. But yeah, I mean, my work is quite flexible. It gives me the time and the space to slow down my life a lot and have the kind of life that I want. And since I can work from anywhere, there was really no reason to stay in DC any longer. So that helped push me to make the decision to relocate to Pittsburgh.
Now, how has COVID affected your job in public health? I'm assuming it comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that today, that when I was 37 weeks pregnant, I went down to DC. I had one final week of in-person meetings, and it just so happened they were all in DC and they were all within a 7-day period. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it, power through, even though I'm super pregnant, and just make it work. And I went down to DC, and that was the week that one of my meetings was canceled because of COVID, because they were activated to respond. And another meeting that was a global health focused meeting, all we did was talk about COVID. So I think I was probably a little bit more aware of it than like the average person, just because it is a public health issue, and it was coming up in my world.
So when you did decide to start looking for a donor, did you always know that you wanted to use a sperm bank? Were you thinking about using a known donor? Kind of how did that all go?
Oh my gosh, I was so resistant to sperm banks at first.
Really? Why? Tell us why.
Yeah, it really, something about it really bothered me, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And frankly, I just didn't want to unpack those feelings, so I avoided it. I like dabbled a little bit, and I'd go to sites and like start trying to look for a donor and just get overwhelmed and quit and not go back. I also had a friend from college that that I I wanted to approach as a known donor. And he and I had a lot of conversations about what it would mean to be a known donor and, you know, all the different parts of it. And he was very excited by the idea and into it. And so I ended up pursuing pregnancy with a known donor at first.
Okay.
Actually did, I think, 8 or 9 cycles with a known donor. And had 2 chemical pregnancies and 1 pregnancy that turned out to be a second trimester loss because of the embryo. The fetus wasn't viable. But yeah, and after that loss was when I decided to make the switch to a sperm bank. Honestly, the known donor route could have worked beautifully if the person that I wanted to be my donor and I had been like physically in the same place at the same time. But it's really hard to have both people be in the same place at the same time. A lot of people don't understand fertility, and for them to understand, it's not like I might need more than one sample during the period when I'm ovulating, and then I don't ovulate. I may not ovulate exactly on schedule, and it was just a lot of logistics.
Let's coordinate.
Yeah. So after 9 cycles of that over a year, I just wanted more control over things, wanted fewer variables. So I decided to make the switch to a sperm bank. As I started trying to figure out how I wanted to do that, there are quite a few banks out there. And at this point, I talked to some other single moms by choice about their experiences and what they'd done. So I was sort of like looking on the websites, just trying to get a feel for the personality of the different banks, how much it cost, how easy it would be to get sperm shipped to my house, what they shared about the donors and the profiles, all of those things. And I just felt really good about Seattle Sperm Bank. It felt, it kind of, I don't want to say it felt like a mom and pop shop because that makes it sound like it's not professional, but it just had this sort of like friendly, comfortable, approachable feel, accessible feel that made me feel like I would get more of an individualized experience than some of the other banks that are bigger and just more that are bigger, that are sort of like part of the baby machine environment. And when I was first trying to figure out what kind of donor, who I wanted as a donor, I was thinking about what I wanted my child, what characteristics I wanted her to have. And I was coming up with things like I wanted her to be curious and ambitious and creative. And you know what? There just aren't check boxes for that. So I was really stumped by I couldn't figure out how to narrow it down based on the characteristics I wanted when there wasn't a checkbox for those characteristics. So I decided that at a minimum, I wanted a donor that was tall. I'm kind of short. I wanted to inject some tall potential into my future offspring. Yes. So that helped a lot. I narrowed down by height. And then my next step was to start looking at their personal essays and just sort of get a sense of why they were drawn to this and what they shared about themselves. And I was immediately drawn to the donor that I chose, in part because he just had such an unconventional, he'd come to the point he was in his life in such an unconventional way. And I really appreciated that he wasn't sort of following that traditional path of high school, college, career, that he'd taken some time to figure out what he wanted. I also really liked that he'd come to the program a little bit later in life after he'd got married and had a kid. I liked that to me, that meant that he had a bit more maturity and had thought about what it meant to have offspring out in the world that he wasn't, caring for on a day-to-day basis. So, and the fact that his wife was involved in making the decision to do this, I really liked that. So luckily he had he just happened to have some ICI vials available, and I think I snatched up the last few of them and started my process.
Now, did you always know you were going to just do home insemination, or had you worked with the fertility clinic? What did that look like?
When I was probably 34, 35, at my annual visit, I'd asked for some, like, what fertility screening can I do, just to sort of get a baseline and see where I am.
Yeah.
And I think they did a test. They said, we can give you a referral to a fertility clinic that everyone in this area uses, and we'll do this one test for you and just let you know where you stand. So they did the test, and I got a call back, and they're like, if you and your husband want to have a kid, you should probably start trying right away, because you're like at borderline for what we would call like low ovarian reserve. Whatever. And I was like, well, first of all, you clearly didn't read my file, because I'm single.
Yes.
And then second of all, when I looked up the numbers and what they meant, I was like, okay, so it's not like that bad. There's still no known fertility issue yet. And it was really an economic thing. I wanted to try with as little intervention as possible, and at lowest cost possible until I felt like I needed more intervention. And I had a deadline. So actually, when I conceived her, I was at the point where I was going to do one more cycle of home ICI, and if that didn't work, I was going to go in and do ICU. Okay. So like it wasn't like I was just going to try this forever. I had a plan.
Yeah, of course you did, Laura. Of course you had a plan. Oh, well, she came at the perfect time.
As an example of how I like to plan, and then when plans go awry, you just roll with it. The week that I was supposed to inseminate for her was my sister and her 9-month-old were coming to town. And my sister was leaving her 9-month-old with me for like 2 nights, I think, while she went to a conference in Boston. And I was supposed to inseminate during that time. And lo and behold, I wasn't ovulating. And I was like, this is weird. I'm always like clockwork. So my sister comes back and she develops mastitis. I'm taking care of a very sick 30-year-old and a 9-month-old, and I'm like trying to track my cycle and figure out when I can ovulate. She's supposed to fly back home, and she's in too much pain, so we change up her flights. She's staying for the weekend, and I'm supposed to be babysitting my friend's 5-year-old and 9-year-old over the weekend. So I pack up my very sick 30-year-old sister, the 9-month-old baby, drive across the city to my friend's house to take care of the 9-year-old and the 5-year-old. And then I finally get a positive ovulation test. Okay. But my sperm is back at my house.
Sitting in the tank.
And then also in the midst of all of this, someone spills coffee on my laptop and my laptop dies. So I packed up the two older kids and drove back to my house, got them ice cream, put them in front of my television, went upstairs, inseminated, and then packed everyone up and went back to their house where my sister was with the baby. So it's one of those things where, like, you know, I had this whole, like, you know, carefully plotted out plan. Everything went upside down, and you just make it work. You just make it work. So I figured that like if she was conceived amidst all that, you know, mess, then I think we're gonna be all right. So I will never forget her conception.
Yes. That was a power move, Laura. You ice cream, sit back, I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah.
You got pregnant. That's awesome. And tell us about, you had as part of your testimonial, you had a little bit of a unique time when not only getting pregnant and actually doing the insemination, but when it came up to time to give birth to her.
Oh yeah.
Soon? Tell us how that went.
Yeah. So I got my prenatal care at a midwife center, which sounds kind of crunchy granola, but this is one of the largest freestanding birth centers in the nation. I think they have 5 birthing rooms in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
But as a public health person, I kind of liked this idea of going back to the roots of caring for the mother and the baby, and kind of like the stripped down, low touch version of things. So I planned to give birth at a midwife center, which meant no epidural.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had hired doulas because it was the only way that I could think of to ensure that I had people with me at the birth. I went with a place that that did doulas in pairs, which I liked because in the event that, you know, the primary doula can't be there, they usually send a backup, but maybe you've never met the person before. At least this way I would know both of them. And they had both said that they were interested in being with me in person if they could when I gave birth. So I had doulas. I was going to give birth at a midwife center, you know, just counting down the days, waiting for it to happen. And on her due date, actually, I woke up to contractions pretty regularly, less than 10 minutes apart, usually about 30 seconds to a minute in length. So I was like, you know, I was like, all right, I guess she's going to come close to her birthday, which, by the way, was February 29th. And I was super gunning for a leap day baby because why not? But then after about 3 hours, it stalled. And I was like, well, I guess that's just early labor for you. And I went about my way. I was super uncomfortable all day Saturday, all day Sunday, all day Monday. On Monday, I had like the house cleaners come and do a deep clean of my house so it would be ready, not for my baby, but for my mom to come visit. Okay. She would have done the white glove test to see how clean it is. So I was, you know, trying to get everything ready. I was super uncomfortable. And at some point I was like, you know, I think I might be leaking amniotic fluid. Like it's a little extra wet down there. Something's going on. And my sister was like, you probably are. You should, you know, go and like call your doctor, go to the midwife, this and that. So at like 1 o'clock in the morning, I called the emergency line for the midwife, and they were like, well, why don't you wait to see if labor starts, call us again at 8 a.m. and we'll go on from there. So I called at 8 a.m., no contractions, and they said, come into the midwife center, we'll evaluate you, see where you are. Because, you know, once your fluid starts leaking, you're on a clock, right?
Right.
I want you to deliver by a certain time. So I drove to the midwife center. I took all my stuff with me just in case. And when I got in, they tested to see if it was fluid. It was. And they're like, okay, we need to get this process started. We're going to put you in one of our birth suites and we're going to break your waters if that's what you want. I did want that. And let's see if we can get labor started. So, you know, I go get all my stuff, get comfortable, and lean back on the bed. They go to break my water, and the midwife is checking the baby's position and everything. And she's like, Laura, I really hate to tell you this, but I think your baby's breech. She's like, I don't know if this is her mouth that I'm poking or her butt, but there's definitely something I'm poking here. And we were all shocked because every time I'd gone in for an appointment, I'd had a different midwife, and every time they'd done evaluation by touch. With midwives, you don't have ultrasounds. You get like one for your anatomy scan, but otherwise you don't have any. And every person who laid their hands on me thought that she was head down. So we were all like shocked. And she was like, you know, she was doing manipulation and feeling around my stomach and, you know, feeling internally. And she's like, I just have a feeling this is a breech baby. So I packed all my stuff up and I drove to the hospital and walked in. Thank goodness I toured at the women's hospital just in case.
Yep. Okay. Of course you did.
Walked in and went through registration, and about that time my contractions had started, and there was a midwife from the midwife center that's on duty at the hospital because they have a relationship there, so they were waiting for her and for the OB on call to come and evaluate me. And again, everyone who touched me was like, that baby's not breech, this is her head, this is her butt. And even the OB wasn't sure, but the second they put the ultrasound on, it was clear that she was breech. So they said, we can call the one other OB who happens to be here who will attempt to flip her, or we can just do a C-section. And I was like, just do the C-section. At this point, my contractions were like constant because she was in a regular position, and it wasn't like that was going to lead to a birth. So it was totally useless pain that I was in. As soon as my doula arrived at the hospital, they wheeled me back to the OR, and at 2 p.m. on March 3rd, Leona made herself known. She popped out, and it was not, of course, not at all what I had, envisioned at all for my birth experience. But honestly, it was the best darn C-section I think I ever could have had. I had my doula, I had my midwife, I had the OB. Everyone was really trying hard to make sure that the birth experience I wanted, I got. They let me, they pulled down the flap so I could see her when she was born. I was alert the entire time, thanks to my brother-in-law, who is a nurse anesthetist, who told me what drugs to not ask for.
Okay.
For my spinal. They put her on my chest almost immediately, and I held her while they were stitching me up, and she started rooting for my breast immediately. And I just, all through the recovery, she was in my arms. It was really just the best experience that I could have hoped for in terms of a C-section. So I was really pleased with it. But it was just not what we expected, was it? It was not what we expected. You threw everyone for a loop.
You and I had talked about on our phone call that you had already connected with some other moms who have siblings of Leona's.
Oh yeah, this has been by far the most unexpected best part of all of this has been my donor family, is what I call them. But there are Facebook groups where you can provide your donor number and search for other people who've used the same donor and connect with them. And I did that on a group for Seattle Sperm Bank, and found 2 other women who were due with their babies over the summer. And so we sort of connected and started a Facebook chat, and then as we found more and more people, we decided we'd make a Facebook group. And we are feeling really pleased with ourselves that we connected with so many people who'd used the donor, and then come to find out there was a whole other Facebook group of people who'd used the same donor, and we merged groups. And at the end of the day, we went from, I went from knowing nothing about Leona's half siblings to finding, I think, like 21 of her half siblings, all across the US and even in Australia. So we've connected with all these families. We have a Facebook group. Everyone is so just supportive and interested in each other's kids, and I feel really connected to them in ways that I hadn't anticipated. One of the donor families had triplets that were born preterm.
Wow.
Right after Leona was born. And, I was rooting for them so much. I felt so invested in their growth, and so surprised by how much they looked like Leona did at that age. And it's been a really wonderful experience to connect with everyone, and to feel like these are all people who chose the same donor for similar reasons. And I can't wait to one day, have the kids meet each other in person and see what kinds, how they look alike, how they act alike, and to see them form relationships moving forward. I think it's pretty clear from research and anecdotes that having donor conceived children connect with other half siblings is really important for their just emotional and social development and their sense of person and belonging. So I'm super excited that we'll have that opportunity.
Well, I think it's great that you have other moms too, just to share not only pictures and the fun stuff, but information about the babies back and forth, and compare milestones and all of that. And it's just a whole nother network of people that are supportive for you. So I'm so happy that you found that.
She did.
Other single mothers by choice, how did you connect with them, and what did that community of women, how did that impact sort of how you went about starting the process for yourself?
Yeah. It's one of those things. It's like when you've never heard of a word before and then you learn it and then you hear it everywhere.
Yeah.
I felt like that's how it was with single moms by choice. It was something I never heard of that phrase before and never known someone who'd done it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I learned about the term and really started paying attention, I realized they were kind of all around me, at least in the DC area, or I at least knew everyone I knew someone else who'd done that. So I started getting connected to other single moms by choice and having little, coffee dates or phone calls or email exchanges and just asking them questions and learning about their experience. And I think it was most helpful because most of them said, it sounds like where you are in your process, like you're ready to go all in. Like you've thought about everything you're supposed to think about. You've done all the things you're supposed to do. You're ready for this. And I really appreciated that, that push to get things started when I was sort of in my early thinking about stages. And, every single mom by choice goes about it in a different way. Some do home insemination, some do known donors, unknown donors. Some people do IVF, some people do, medicated, unmedicated. There's so many different ways. Some people adopt. There's so many different ways to become a mother. Is it funny? And it really helped me feel confident that I was trying to design a path that worked for me and my future family, that there was no like one cookie cutter way to do it. I also found a lot of groups on Facebook.
Yeah.
There's an amazing community, and I've been blown away at how, especially with COVID and the Black Lives Matter protest, how everyone definitely comes from different walks of life and perspectives, but everyone is so supportive of each other in pursuit of becoming a mother. And it's been really beautiful and supportive. So the Facebook groups were definitely really helpful. And when I moved to Pittsburgh, I was able to connect with a small group of Pittsburgh single moms by choice. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know them in person whenever we can. But it's been connecting with other single moms by choice, or even just talking to other people who've pursued parenthood in non-traditional ways has been, there's just a huge community out there that I don't think everyone's aware of. So many people have reproductive assistance to get pregnant, or use eggs or embryos or sperm. And it's been really lovely to connect with people who maybe haven't traveled the same path I have, but that get it and the ins and outs of it. So
absolutely. Think you want to have more children?
Yes, absolutely. But there's also a limit on that. If I don't get pregnant before I'm 40, I will probably stop trying, because I don't want to go through the little baby stage by myself. I don't want it like her to be 4 years old and I'm going through the little baby stage again by myself. That just doesn't seem like there's a balance between what I want my life to look like and what I'm willing to do to get there. So I hope to be able to give her a sibling within the next couple of years. And if that doesn't happen, then I'll have to, I'm currently going through the process of mourning the idea of being a mom of more than one kid. Okay, and when I get through that, then I'll be ready to try to have more kids. But I need to be okay with being the mom of an only child first, because that needs to be the reality. So.
No, I get that. It's like when you let go of the attachment of something, and then it can come to you,
Yeah. And if it doesn't, it's like you're okay with it. Not if it doesn't work out. I mean, you might be sad, but you're more likely to recognize when that moment has passed and when it's time to shift your focus to something else.
So I wanted to ask you, like, if you had sort of maybe advice or something to say to other women that are maybe in their mid-30s and they really want to be a mom and they just haven't met a partner yet that they wanted to move forward and do this? What is your advice through all of this, for that woman that's
Yeah. So I think part of my advice is definitely find an objective third-party person, a counselor, a social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, someone that you can do a little bit of work, a really good friend, or a friend who's willing to like ask you hard questions, just to do a little bit of that personal work, to prepare for this. Trying to conceive is not always an easy or fun process, especially if it takes longer than you thought it would. You spend so much mental energy thinking about, are you pregnant? Are you about to ovulate? How are you going to make all these things happen? It's just a tremendous amount of mental work. So having someone it's sort of like training for a marathon. Like, you want a training partner, you want a coach, you want someone who can ask you these questions and help you think through things and be your sounding board, so that you're not taken aback or you're not surprised by some of the doubts or concerns you have. And there are so many doubts, but having the social connections and the sort of mental strength to process the doubts as they pop up is really, really important. Another piece of advice would be, plan for the pandemic.
yeah.
I had all kinds of plans and ideas and strategies for like how I was going to make this whole single mom by choice thing work, for the birth, for the fourth trimester, and moving forward. And then all of that was just turned upside down. And it was something I couldn't have planned for. So I think when your plans don't work out, I hate to say have backup plans, because that just involves more planning, but it's all going to work out. It's all going to work out. But as a single mother by choice, you have to be willing to ask for help. You have to be willing to accept help. You have to be willing to say, things aren't going as I intended, and I can't do this alone. I shouldn't have to do it alone. I need help. And, you might have to pay for the help. You might have family and friends who can step in, but I think have the best plans that you can, think through all the steps, and then be willing to reach out and ask for help when you need it. It was funny to me when I was thinking about my birth plan, because there were things that I had to think about that other people wouldn't normally think about. And there were big things like, if I go into labor at home, how am I going to get from my house to the birth center? Because normally your spouse or your partner would drive you. That wasn't an option for me. My in-laws couldn't drive me because it was a violation of their insurance. I was like, I guess I can take an Uber. People do that all the time in like New York City. Yeah. But there were just little bits and pieces that I needed to at least think through and imagine, so that when things did go awry, like my brain was already ready to flex those muscles to kind of go with the flow and figure out a solution quickly. So yeah, I guess contingency planning. But yeah, just planning for being prepared for things to go upside down. I mean, that's motherhood, I think. That's parenthood, is that there's always going to be something that goes not the way that you thought it would. And it's part mental, managing your expectations, and part just having the muscle memory, which is, again, why it's so much like running a marathon. Running is mental. You have to believe that your body can do it, believe that your mind can do it. But you also have to, like, practice and your body needs to know that it can do it physically. So yeah, I always compare everything to running, though. That's just me.
Well, I'm going to go on a limb and say I doubt many moms that gave birth during a pandemic saw that coming. So kudos to you for obviously killing it over there and for thriving with her. She's a beautiful baby. I'm so happy for you. Your story is very empowering, and I know it's not only inspired me, but it's going to give a lot of women the inspiration to believe in themselves and be able to follow their dreams. That is that of motherhood. But
Yeah.
it's great.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And
I hope that, I've been very transparent and open about my entire process because I want other women out there who are like treading water or putting their lives on hold to feel like they do have options and choices, and like you don't have to live like that. So if one person watches it and is like, you know what, if she can do it, I can do it, then I feel like it was well worth my time.
yeah, well, no, I really do think it's very inspiring to a lot of women. So I appreciate you sharing it. Thanks. Y'all enjoy your nap.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Said bye.
Bye, y'all.
Okay, bye.